So this goofy looking thing is an LED light. It's actually used for camping. You put it in your tent and it works really well. But it uses 4 disposable alkaline batteries, and I really hate just using those. They last for maybe a couple of days, and then you have to throw them away and put in new ones. So I wanted to convert it to being rechargeable, and so this video is about trying to do that in general, how you might convert something that's really made for alkaline batteries and see if you can make it work with rechargeable batteries. So once you screw off the back of the light, it just looks like this. It's super simple. There are these batteries, alkaline batteries, and then a switch, and then it's just the ring, the PCBs in a ring that have the LEDs on them. And of course, one thing that we know about this circuit is each one of those batteries supplies 1.5 volts, because that's what AA batteries do. And so there are 4 of them, so this is a 6-volt circuit. So what I'm showing here is just sort of a circuit I made up to kind of illustrate how these things quite often work. The batteries are usually in series, meaning they're just placed end to end, and so you can add together the voltages. That's why when you have those 4 1.5 volt batteries together, you get 6 volts, because you string all those voltages together. So it's 4 times 1.5. And then at the top there you see a switch, and then you see some configuration of LEDs there on the right. And so in this image you can then see how the current flows. It flows around in a circle from one part of from the positive end of the battery to the negative end. That's the way you can sort of conceptually think of it. So when thinking about converting this circuit to use rechargeable batteries, which by the way are 1.2 volts instead of 1.5, it'd be good to know then how this circuit behaves. Really, how much current does it draw when it's using that 6 volts that you get from the alkalines? How much current does it draw? But then more importantly, what if I gave it less voltage? What if I'm using those rechargeable batteries? Then how much current would it use, and would the LEDs still light? So the most convenient way to do that is to replace the batteries temporarily with a benchtop power supply. This allows you to sort of configure the voltage to be whatever you want, so you can kind of see how the circuit behaves. Benchtop power supplies have gotten a lot cheaper. They're pretty available. But you can do it without one. You can do it actually with the batteries in place, and then use a multimeter to measure the current. But at least in this example, I'm going to use my benchtop supply. So what you see here are the positive and negative cables coming from the bench supply tying into the circuit. So the negative cable from the bench supply goes to the negative connector, and the positive cable goes to the positive connector. So here I've set the supply for 6 volts, but interestingly enough, it's not getting there because I limited the current to 0.5 amp, and it's drawing 0.5 amp and dragging down the voltage. So 0.5 amp is a lot of current, so I'm going to try and reduce the voltage and see how the LEDs continue to light and if I can reduce that current load. So here I've reduced the voltage to 5 volts, and it's still drawing almost 0.5 amp. LEDs are still burning bright. Now it's down to 4 volts, it's 238 milliamps, and still going strong. So here I've reduced the voltage to 3.6 volts, and why did I use that number? Because it's 3 times 1.2, so 3 of the rechargeable batteries will draw, it looks like about 150 milliamps, and the LEDs are still fine certainly for a tent at night. Okay, I wanted to have a little aside here just to show something that I think is one of the coolest things on the web. The site is called Lush Projects, and they have an online circuit simulator, and it's free. And it's just really, really easy to use, and it's just kind of fun. So I wanted to just show what this circuit looks like, or it's sort of a made-up circuit, but what it might look like in the simulator. So just as in the other schematic, you see the batteries here, and you see a switch, and you see the LEDs. So once you tell the simulator to run, I can then go over and click on the switch, and you see the little bubbles moving, which is to indicate the current, and the LEDs have all lit up brightly. And that's to kind of simulate this 6 volt, the 6 volt version of this circuit. And note when I hover over a component, I see the voltage and current for that component. And so here's a different version of the circuit. Notice now that there's 3 batteries, and actually these batteries are they're 1.2 volts, And when I click on the switch, the LEDs do light up. They're kind of dimmer. It's one of the great things about the simulator is it actually kind of tries to give you a visual indication of what's happening. And the bubbles move a little slower. And that of course is just to indicate that there's less current moving. Okay, now let's just talk about the changes. So it would be fine to just simply replace the alkaline batteries with rechargeable ones, and then when they need charging you can take them out and charge them and put them back in. So that's one way to solve this problem. But as we saw, you really don't need all that voltage. Even if you used 4 rechargeables, that'd be 4.8 volts, and that's still really more than this thing needs. So I cut it down to 3 rechargeable batteries, and I wanted to recharge them inside the unit. So in order to do that, that involves these 2 boards. One is very simple. It's simply what's called a breakout board. It allows you to connect a micro USB connector to get the 5 volts from USB in. And then the other board is specifically for charging 3 rechargeable batteries. And I'll provide links to these in the description. I think I paid about $10 for the charger board, and you only pay about 40 cents for the breakout board, but you have to buy 10 of them. So I paid maybe $4 or something like that. Okay, before we leave this image, I'll just talk about how these boards are hooked together. So here you can see that breakout board, there's just 2 wires, the power and ground from the USB, and that connects into the charging board. And then on the other side, there are 2 wires that leave the charging board, and they just go to the positive and negative terminals of that string of batteries. So here's what it would look like in sort of schematic form. Starting at the left, you see that USB connector, and then it goes into the charging board, and then the charging board simply connects to the positive and negative terminals of the 3 rechargeable batteries. And nothing's changed downstream to the right, of that. The switch and all of the LEDs are exactly the same as they were before. So now we can just expect that the 3 rechargeable batteries, the 3.6 volts that they provide, will draw about 150 milliamps, and we can calculate how long that should last. So you'll see here that I'm actually using these pretty crappy batteries. They're only 900 milliamp hours. And you'll recall that the circuit draws about 150 milliamps with using 3 of the rechargeable batteries, the 1.2 volts, so 3.6 total volts. So we can get an approximation of the time by dividing the 900 milliamp hours by the 150 milliamps, and we get 6 hours. So that's a ballpark estimate of how long you could run this before it would need another charge. So far this has been working well, and I hope this video is encouraging someone to maybe use a few less disposable batteries, and also just explore the fun circuits you have in your house. Take care.